From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Today, we've received from the United Kingdom a clear and written threat that they could storm our embassy in London if Ecuador refuses to hand in Julian Assange.
Ecuador is reportedly announcing today it'll allow WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to remain in its embassy in London indefinitely, but British authorities have threatened to storm the embassy and arrest Assange anyway. We'll speak with Julian Assange's attorney, Michael Ratner, and get a report from outside the embassy in London. Then thousands of young undocumented immigrants waited in lines as long as a mile yesterday to apply to temporarily remain and work in the United States legally.
These are young people who study in our schools, they play in our neighborhoods, they're friends with our kids, they pledge allegiance to our flag. They are Americans in their heart, in their minds, in every single way but one. On paper.
Meanwhile, Arizona Governor Jan Brewer has issued an executive order barring immigrants who are granted a reprieve from receiving public benefits or getting driver's licenses. We'll go to Phoenix to speak with journalist Roberto Lovato, then Mexican poet Javier Sicilia. Last year, his son was killed by drug traffickers. This week, he's launched a caravan of peace across the United States to condemn U.S. drug policy.
We're here to tell ourselves and them that we will not turn this pain in our souls, in our bodies, in hate, nor in more violence, but in a vehicle to help us restore love, peace, justice, dignity, and the stuttering democracy that we're losing.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The government of Ecuador is announcing its decision on the asylum bid of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange today. The New York Times is reporting Ecuador is prepared to allow WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to remain in its London embassy indefinitely under a type of humanitarian protection. On Wednesday, Britain threatened to raid the embassy if Quito did not hand over Assange. The threat drew a rebuke from Ecuadorian Foreign Minister Ricardo Patino.
Today, we've received from the United Kingdom a clear and written threat that they could storm our embassy in London if Ecuador refuses to hand in Julian Assange. We want to make it absolutely clear that we are not a British colony and that the times of colonialism are over.
Britain has told Ecuador giving Julian Assange asylum would not change a thing and that it might still revoke the diplomatic status of Quito's embassy in London to allow the WikiLeaks founder's extradition. We'll have more on the Assange case after headlines. Dozens of people have been killed in the latest attack by the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad on a rebel stronghold. At least 30 people, including children, died Wednesday when Syrian warplanes bombed the rebel-held town of Azaz near the border with Turkey. At least 10 homes were reportedly destroyed in the attack. Speaking to the BBC during a visit to Syria, UN Emergency Relief Coordinator Valerie Amos said the situation on the ground is getting worse.
Here in March, and the situation has clearly got worse since then. Our assessment at the end of March was that about 1 million people needed help. In my discussions with government yesterday, it's clear that that number has gone up significantly.
In other Syrian news, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation has suspended the country's membership in protest of the Assad regime's crackdown. The OIC Secretary General announced the move at a summit in Mecca.
This is a very strong message for the Syrian regime, telling them that the Islamic world cannot accept a system that kills its people. And it's a message to the international community as well, telling them that the Islamic community supports a political, peaceful solution and does not want any more bloodshed.
Militants in Pakistan have attacked an army base that some have speculated may store a number of Pakistan's nuclear weapons. The attackers struck the Minhas Air Force Base overnight, battling with Pakistani troops until the early morning hours. 7 militants and 1 soldier were reportedly killed. It's believed the gunmen had intended to target warplanes in anticipation of a Pakistani military attack on the militant stronghold of North Waziristan. The base is believed to hold at least some of Pakistan's nuclear arsenal of an estimated 100 warheads, but the Pakistani militaries denied the storage of any nuclear weapons there. Tens of thousands of young undocumented immigrants waited in mile-long lines across the United States Wednesday to take advantage of a new federal policy that may grant them legal status to temporarily remain and work in the United States. Under the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, immigrants under 31, including students who are enrolled in school on the day they apply, will now be eligible for a 2-year reprieve from deportation if they demonstrate they came to the United States before their 16th birthday, lived here for the past 5 years, have not been convicted of certain crimes, and do not pose a national security threat. As the policy went into effect, Republican Governor John Brewer of Arizona issued an executive order barring immigrants who are granted a reprieve from receiving public benefits or getting driver's licenses. She also instructed state agencies to make sure only legal residents access taxpayer finance benefits. We'll have more on the new federal immigration policy later in the broadcast. A Pennsylvania judge has upheld a controversial voter identification law that critics say will benefit Republicans this November. The measure requires voters to produce photo ID before they can cast ballots. Opponents of the law had sought to delay its implementation until after the November 6 elections. The American Civil Liberties Union and other groups say they'll appeal to the state Supreme Court. A security guard at the right-wing Family Research Council in Washington, D.C. was shot and wounded Wednesday by a man who reportedly disagreed with the group's views. Police say the shooter opened fire after the security guard confronted him in the lobby of the group's offices. The suspect, identified as Floyd Corkins, reportedly expressed objections to the Family Research Council's opposition to LGBT rights. Corkins had volunteered at the D.C. Center, an LGBT community center in Washington, D.C. The center quickly joined with more than 40 other LGBT rights groups to denounce the attack, saying, quote, "We utterly reject and condemn such violence." 7 major banks have been subpoenaed in a probe of the manipulation of the London Interbank Offered Rate, or LIBOR, which provides the basis for rates on trillions of dollars in transactions across the globe. The manipulation meant millions of borrowers paid the wrong amount on their loans. New York officials have subpoenaed UBS, Deutsche Bank, Royal Bank of Scotland, JP Morgan, Citigroup, HSBC, and Barclays Bank over the past several months. Barclays was fined $453 million in June for its role in fixing LIBOR. Both the Justice Department and the Attorneys General of New York and Connecticut are currently conducting investigations. A federal probe into the failed commodities and derivatives brokerage house MF Global is unlikely to result in any criminal prosecutions of top executives. MF Global filed for one of the largest bankruptcies in American corporate history last year, with almost $40 billion in liabilities. It was the largest failure on Wall Street since the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008. Regulators later discovered up to $1.2 billion in customer funds that should have been kept segregated were missing. But the New York Times reports federal investigators have concluded the losses were due to mistakes rather than fraud. Former New Jersey Governor and U.S. Senator John Corzine, who headed MF Global, would be among those to evade prosecution. Raging wildfires across parts of the western U.S. have forced hundreds of people to evacuate their homes. The fires have swept through more than 500,000 acres in Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and California so far. On the campaign trail, Vice President Joe Biden's under fire for what Republicans call an attempt to link Mitt Romney to the policies of slavery. Speaking in Virginia, Biden said Romney wants to put Americans back in chains through his opposition to financial regulation.
Every Republican's voted for it. Look at what they value and look at their budget and what they're proposing. Romney wants to he said in the first 100 days, he's going to let the big banks once again write their own rules. Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains.
Vice President Biden has stood by his remarks, saying he intended no comparisons to slavery. A group of retired military and CIA officers have launched a public campaign accusing President Obama of leaking national security information for political gain. In a lengthy web video and in advertisements planned for swing states, the officers say the Obama administration has exploited intelligence victories, including the killing of Osama bin Laden.
These are the experts on the subject, the people who have spent much of their lives in military and intelligence operations. They know what they are talking about, and they have had enough. They've come together to make sure Americans understand what's going on and what's at stake, protecting operational security. Their mission? Stop the politicians from politically capitalizing on U.S. national security operations and secrets.
With all due respect, Mr. President, we need you to close your lips and to shut up when it comes to operational security regarding our armed forces. It's critical for you as a leader to understand that, and what the SEALs say, we do it, we don't talk about it.
The video is already drawing comparisons to the Swift boat controversy of the 2004 election, when right-wing donors funded videos questioning then-Democratic candidate John Kerry's military service in Vietnam. The group behind the new videos, Special Operations OPSEC Education Fund, claims to be nonpartisan, but a number of its members have ties to Republican and Tea Party campaigns. The group shares office space with a Republican consulting firm, and it's refused to identify its donors so far. A prominent human rights activist in Bahrain has been sentenced to 3 years in prison for taking part in protests against the U.S.-backed regime. Nabil Rajab, the president of the Bahrain Center for Human Rights, was detained in June after criticizing the Bahraini government in Twitter messages and in media appearances, including one on Democracy Now! In May. During his comments, Rajab had criticized U.S. support for the ruling monarchy.
We are very upset about United States position with Bahrain. We are very upset about United States trying to hide the crimes and trying to hide the violation happening in all the Gulf country, because our Gulf country a rich region, because it's a big arm market, because it's a big oil exporter. We have to suffer for that. We are victims for being a rich region. We are a victim of being a region that have an interest with United States. Unfortunately, United States and the West as well comes after United States have ignored completely the crime with what's happening here.
For the full interview with Nabil Rajab, now sentenced to 3 years in prison, you can go to our website at democracynow.org. And this news just in: a NATO helicopter has crashed in southern Afghanistan, killing 11, including 7 international troops. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.